Hey everybody, this is Tracy here to do another episode of A View from Tracy's Point, and we're getting ready to recap. This is season 1, episode 11, and it was titled The Right Thing to Do. So the show opens up and we have a flashback of Jack, and he's a teenager and he's confronting his dad because I guess his dad was abusive to his mom, and they were arguing, and he wasn't beating her up or anything, but I think he had grabbed her by the arm. And so, Jack confronts the father and the father leaves, and then, he's talking to his mom and apologizing for the way the dad was acting. And the mom made him promise that when he became a man that, he would never act the way that his dad acts. So then the scene moves to Jack and Rebecca, and they're married and they're looking at an apartment. And I think Rebecca had just found out that she was pregnant, or she might have been a couple of months pregnant. And so Rebecca, she likes the apartment, but she says that it's $200 a month and she's not sure if they can afford it. And I'm laughing to myself because I'm thinking that same apartment, if that building's still standing, is probably $2,000 today that somebody is paying. So then they go to the doctor's office, and their obstetrician name was Dr. Snyder. And so, he tells them that he has some news for them, and he breaks it to them that they're having triplets. And I think that they were like in a state of shock for a moment. And so then after they leave, Dr. Snyder goes into like the break room, and he's talking to the doctor who eventually did deliver the triplets. And he's saying how he hates, having to tell people that they're having triplets. And the doctor is basically saying, well, I'm glad they're your patients and not mine. And I just think it's ironic that he was the one that ended up having to be on call the night that Rebecca came in, because if you remember, Dr. Snyder had to have an emergency appendectomy. So we're in the present time, and Kate is at the emergency room, and she's like freaking out, and it's all this movement swirling around her. And so it makes us think that, Toby is being rushed into emergency surgery. But no, it was just the hustle bustle of the emergency room, and Kate just needs to know what room Toby has been assigned to. And so, she knew what room he had been assigned to. She needs to know how to get to the room. And so we find out that Toby has experienced a arrhythmia, and he doesn't want to call it a heart attack or a small heart attack. So he's trying to make light of the situation, and then he's trying to get Kate, I guess, to I don't know what he was trying to get Kate to do. I don't even want to think about what he was trying to get Kate to do. But then later on, they're playing poker together, and he wants it to be strip poker, and, wants Kate to take off her clothes. And then the doctor walks in, and, Toby's still making jokes, being the comedian, but the doc, after he laughs with him for a while, he tells him, it's time to be serious because, he needs to talk to him about his condition. And we learn that there's 2 tears in 2 of the heart's chambers. And he tells Toby that, it can be fixed with medicine, but it's his recommendation that Toby has surgery to repair the tears, and, so he won't have any problems going forward. And I can just imagine that this has to be like a very, very scary thought for Toby, but Kate is basically telling him, no, you should go for it. You should do the surgery. I'll be here with you. But Toby says, no, he doesn't want to do it. Then we move on to Randall's house, and Randall, Beth, and William, they're sitting at the kitchen table having breakfast and drinking coffee. And then here comes Kevin and Sloan. And if you remember, she was the playwright. And they come in, and Beth is sitting there like, okay, so this is just the dewdrop in. Now everybody just coming in and out as they please, doing whatever they want to, and she's feeling like she's lost total control of her house. But she doesn't say anything, because she's so supportive of Randall. And then we have a flashback scene of Jack and Rebecca. And, they're kind of like dealing with the revelation that they're about to have triplets. And it was just like a little quick flashback that lasted a few seconds. And then it goes back to Randall's house, and Beth is preparing a bath. And, she asks Randall, if he wants to join her. But Randall is there to vent about William and the fact that he's gay, and the guy Jesse, showing up, and he asks Beth if he's homophobic, and of course she tells him no, that he's too loving, kind and considerate of the people to be homophobic. And then Beth suggests that Randall just get to know Jesse and sit down and talk with him. So the truth be told, Beth really isn't concerned about who's sleeping with who. She just wants to get in that bathtub and relax, and she wants her husband to get in there and relax with her. Then we have another scene where we go into the past, and we have Jack, and he goes to his boss to ask him for a raise. And at this juncture in his life, he's actually a foreman for a construction company, and the boss is in there, going over the plans and working on this house, and he's complaining about how the house is going to be more trouble than he thought it was going to be, or harder to fix up than he thought it was going to be. And so Jack tells him, that he's expecting triplets, and the guy's like, oh my God, I'm sorry to hear that. And then Jack is like, I was too, but it's no problem. He says, but I'm going to need a raise. And so the guy offers him a 10% raise, which would take him to $17,500. And imagine that, will you? Because there are people today, which is like, 36 years later from when the show is supposed to be, the scene is supposed to be taking place, and there are people that still aren't making that much money. But here Jack is having to support his wife and soon to be 3 kids off of that income. And so I really think that the house, I'm looking at the house, and I think it's the house that Jack and Rebecca end up living in when we see later scenes of them in the flashbacks. Now we're at the set, it's the modern day, and Kevin and Sloan are going over some scenes, and we find out, that Olivia quit the show, and Kevin is now financing the play, and Sloan is going to be playing the lead. And so the producer tells them that he thinks that the play is going to be great because they have such great chemistry together on the stage. But we're going to find out that later on his opinion changes when Olivia shows back up. So although I think Kevin, is falling in love with Sloan, or it appears that he's falling in love with her, we have Olivia. She comes back and she's dyed her hair blonde and cut it off. And she's talking about how she's been to all these different places in Utah and Portland and California and met all these different people. And so now she has a totally different perspective on her life, and she's back to do the play and to rekindle her relationship with Kevin. And so Sloan speaks up, and it's like, this is my man now, we're dating, what are you talking about? But then the producer comes up, and he's happy to see that Olivia's back, and then he basically tells Olivia, that he's happy she's there because they were dead in the water without her. And I thought that was so tacky of him. Then we head back over to the hospital, and Toby, like I said, he doesn't want to have the surgery, but Kate wants him to do it, and she's trying to get him to understand the severity of his medical condition. And then she even calls him a child and an idiot within a matter of seconds. And so she storms out of the hospital room. That she doesn't want to be arguing with a man that has a heart condition. And I just really feel sorry for Toby, because that has got to be like a frightening experience. He's away from home, because remember, they live in California, and he came to the East Coast to spend Christmas with her. And now all of this is happening so fast. And, Kate isn't really, understanding his side of, what he must be experiencing in that moment. And so then we have another past scene, and Rebecca is having lunch with her mom. Her mom's a real piece of work, and she's telling her about the triplets, and the mom is not happy, and she's being very condescending, because she doesn't like Jack. She doesn't think Jack is good enough or makes enough money, but she doesn't like Jack, that's apparent, but she says that she may have a solution to their problem. So we're back at Randall's house, and Jesse arrives to pick up William, and Randall offers him some Japanese whiskey, but then he remembers that both William and Jesse are recovering addicts, and that wasn't a good move. So it was a real awkward moment there, and then Randall asks Jesse, how did him and William meet? And Jesse jokes with him and tells him that they met on Tinder. And so Randall, he says that there's nothing sexier, than a man with a sense of humor. And, Jesse looks at him like, where the hell did that come from? So now, Jack is like, okay, maybe I need to go have that drink after all, because, he was nervous on how he should interact with Jesse. So thankfully, William comes in and, saves him from the moment. But then when Randall asked him, well, when will he be back or what time will he be back? William let him know that he was spending the night with Jesse and that he was going to play it by ear the next day. And so Randall's just like confused and lost and doesn't know what to say. We go back over to the hospital and Kate returns and she received a text from Toby and he was basically telling her to get back to the hospital as soon as possible. And so he tells her that he's decided to have the surgery and it's actually getting ready to happen. Like they're prepping him, giving him, some anesthesia to calm him down, to get him ready to take him to the emergency room. And so he confesses to Kate that he's in love with her, but I think we already knew that, so I'm not sure why Kate didn't know that. But, he's still joking around. And even as they're trying to push him out of the room to take him to the operating room, he was still, telling jokes, even though he was nervous about doing the surgery. So Kevin and Randall, they come to the hospital, to be with Kate while she's going through this. And Kate realizes that when Toby said that he was in love with her, that she didn't say that she loved him back. So now she's concerned that he might die on the operating table, never knowing that she does love him. So to distract her from, what she's going through, Kate asks them, what's going on in their lives. And so Randall says that one of his co-workers sent his best to Kate. And then he starts talking about some muffins that she made. And so, last thing Kate want to hear about is some food. So she goes to Kevin and asks Kevin, so what's going on in your life? And Kevin lets them know that Olivia's back and she wants to start their relationship again, as well as, take back on her role in the play. But he's with Sloane and that he wants to keep Sloane in that lead role in the play. So Kate wants to know, what he's going to do about his situation. And he starts comparing how, Olivia, she's sexy in like the British way, because she has the accent and everything. And then he thinks that Sloane is like a librarian, but she's like a sexy librarian. And, he's going back and forth like they both have great qualities and he's lucky to have either one of them, but he thinks he's going to stick with Sloane. Then Randall is like, that's not really a problem. A problem is learning that your newly found biological father is dying and that he's also gay. And then Kate and Kevin at the same time say that's really not a problem. And I'm like, damn, y'all harsh. We have another flashback scene and it's of Rebecca and Jack, and he asks her about the lunch with her mother, and she lets him know that, her mother was very judgmental, but she did offer, to let them move in, with her and her husband for a year or two. And Jack is surprised, that Rebecca would even consider the offer. And so Jack is like, who are you and what have you done with my wife? And Rebecca says, she just wants to keep an open mind. And also, would he go to the store and get her a gallon of chocolate chip mint ice cream? And so then Jack is like, okay, now that's the wife that I'm looking for, because the other one that's even considering, moving in with her mom, knowing, how the mom feels, is not his wife. And so Jack leaves to go get the ice cream. And when he walks out the door, Rebecca breaks down and starts crying. And so he gets halfway down the stairs and he remembers he left his wallet. And so he comes back and to get the wallet. And when he walks into the house, he can hear her sobbing in the other room. And he tries to pretend like, he didn't hear her. So he goes back and then closes the door to let her know that he's in there and tells her, that he forgot the wallet and that he's leaving. And I'm just thinking this show is so real, because that scene had me crying, because I'm thinking, how hard must that be? You're newly married, you find out you're having triplets, your mom hates your husband, you guys really can barely afford the one baby you thought you were having, and now you got to figure out what you're going to do with 3 babies. So it was too much. As Jack is, driving around, he passes by the Friendly ice cream place, and I thought that was so funny because we have Friendlies here. So I didn't know they had been in business that long, but we have them here in St. Petersburg. And so he passes by the place and he goes over to his father's house. So evidently, they have a horrible relationship and don't talk to each other, because when the father opened the door, the first thing he said was, "What are you doing here?" So I know it took everything in Jack to have to go to his dad begging for help, but he does ask him for a loan. And so the dad is pretty much like, what did you do? Did you gamble the money away? And then Jack, instead of telling him, "I'm married, my wife is expecting triplets, we need a bigger place," he tells the dad that yes, he lost the money gambling and that he's a screw up and that everything the dad said that he would be, he turned out to be. And then that seemed to have appeased the father that he was right. And he decides to give Jack the money. So we're back in the present, and Sloane walks up and she overhears Kevin telling Olivia that he's keeping Sloane in the play. And then Olivia, she didn't seem to be too bothered about being cut from the play, but she wanted to know about their relationship and if they are getting back together. And so Kevin starts, reading off all the great qualities that Sloane has. And, he basically says that, he's going to do the right thing and stick it out with Sloane, even if that's not what he wants to do. So after Olivia walks away, Jack asks Sloane, did she want to go get something to eat or go get a drink? And then she says, basically said no, and then repeated verbatim, the little phrase he said about, sometimes in life you have to do things that you don't want to do, letting him know that she heard him. So of course, he runs after her trying to apologize. But at this point, what can you really say? You done hurt the woman, let her know that she was second best. So we head over to the hospital, and Toby is out of surgery, and Kate is, she's pouring her heart out and telling him everything, that she's wanted to say to him about how happy she is that he's in her life, because she's thinking that Toby is knocked out on them drugs. But then, being the jokester that he is very much coherent in hearing everything that she says, and lets her know that he had been awake for about an hour listening to her go on and on. And so the two talk, and they basically profess their undying love for each other. And I think at the end of the conversation, they were engaged and planning to get married, I guess, when they get back to California. I don't know. So William returns home, and Randall, wants to know if he thinks that they have bonded together. And so he feels like since Jesse came along, that William has pushed him and his family aside, and that Jesse is the only thing that matters to him now. And so William tells Randall that he can feel that the cancer is spreading, and that it's in full force now, and that the medication isn't really working. And so what Jesse has been doing is taking him out, trying to find long-term, or I guess in this case short-term care in a nursing home, because he doesn't want to, be a burden on Randall and his family, in his dying moments. And so Randall, he's not having it. He's like, you've been living here, and I don't mind if you die here. And I don't know what Beth is going to think about that. But so they talk it out, and William basically says that he wants to stop the treatment. And Randall is in agreement with him that, if he doesn't want to take the medicine anymore, that, he can stop taking it, and that they would try to give him the best quality of life for the time that he has remaining. And so once again, I was sitting there boohoo crying at that scene, because I'm just like, I don't know if I could take this. It's just so real and so raw and just so emotional. And this is the kind of stuff that's happening in people's lives every day. So the show ends with Jack trading in the car that he was driving and getting a station wagon. Y'all remember the station wagons? I remember when we were little, we had a little brown station wagon. Well, it wasn't little, it was a big station wagon, like that one that Jack now has for him and his family. And, he's so excited, and he bought the house from his boss, and he's going to finish fixing the house up. And so, Rebecca's trying to find out, where did he get the money from? And he said it was a loan, but it was worth it. And so he's taking her in the house, and he's walking her through, through and giving her a tour. And he tells her to just imagine them living in the house with their kids. And so she closes her eyes, and she does, and she can see herself with the babies, and she can see herself with Jack, playing with the kids and everything. And here come the tears again. I was just so emotional through this episode. I don't know what was wrong with me, because this show just has me all in my feelings, but I'm loving it. I really am loving it. So that's it for me. Leave your comments below, rate the video, and please subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. And until the next time, take care. Bye-bye.